My name is Bryan Baird, and I'm the brewmaster and founder of Baird Brewing Company, which is located in Shizuoka, Japan. Well, I was born in California, but I grew up in Oxford, Ohio, which is a little bit north of Cincinnati. I was a typical 22-year-old liberal arts graduate that had no idea what he wanted to do in life, but had an opportunity to spend a year abroad teaching English in Japan. When I got there, it was a matter of love at first sight. I never left. My wife and I founded the company in 2000, although we still didn't have the brewing license when we opened. So for the first 6 months, we operated our fish market tap room as a beer bar restaurant. And we started brewing Baird beer just for sale on premises in January 2001. Our idea was to make the sort of beers we wanted to make, which are unfiltered, naturally carbonated beers full of flavor and character, that we needed to retail them ourselves. And so they were only available at our pub. But our pub was in the city of Numazu, which is a fish market town in Shizuoka. Very blue collar, and frankly nobody was interested in the beers we were making. And it was excruciatingly hard the first few years. Very few customers. In recent years, with persistence and word of mouth, Japanese people have really come to appreciate it. There's a very robust, small but enthusiastic community of beer geeks in Tokyo, and we're only a short distance from Tokyo. So what we found after a few years, that on weekends and national holidays when we were open all day, we had a lot of people coming from the Tokyo area to drink our beer. The more scuttlebutt about us outside of our local city, the more the locals began to wake up to what we were doing, and slowly it led to better local patronage as well. We currently have plans to build a new brewery, not in Numazu, but in the neighboring town of Izu, which is just a beautiful historical hotspot town. My goal has always been to sort of build one of the world's most beautiful country brewery, and actually get engaged in organic agriculture and really demonstrate that brewing historically is less of an industrial endeavor and more of an extension of agriculture. The new brewery is an effort for us to demonstrate that, not just talk about it. We have 10 year-round beers. On the low end, we have a single take session ale, which is about a 4.5% fermented with a Belgian yeast strain, and it's got a lot of hop flavor and aroma, but very little bitterness. Rising Sun Pale Ale, arguably our best seller, although nothing accounts for more than 20% of our production, and it's a sort of a citrusy, West Coast inspired pale ale. We have Red Rose, Amber Ale. Ambers, you know, they get short shrift, I think. Most of them tend to be pedestrian and boring, but this has a lot of complexity and interaction between malt and hops. We have Suruga Bay Imperial IPA, which they told us we couldn't make a normal IPA and sell it in the Japan market 8 or 9 years ago. About 2 years ago, we developed an Imperial IPA, and it's done extremely well. The combination of New Zealand and American hops, and it's very well balanced. Teikoku IPA was our original IPA, and it's more of the English IPA. It's all floor malted maris otter, malt, and a combination of East Kent Golding and Styrian Golding hops. We have Shimaguni Stout, which is a classic Irish style dry stout in the mid 4% range. And we have Kurofune Porter, which is a robust porter. Kurofune are the black ships that Commodore Perry rode into and busted Japan open to trade, and we feel that would be the beer that he would have drunk if he had beer on his ship, which he probably did. Angry Boy Brown Ale, which is sort of my autobiographical beer. My mom used to call me the Angry Boy. I'm less angry, but I burn with passion, intensity, and it's a strong, hoppy brown ale. We actually dry hop it, so it's not your English grandfather's brown ale. Ukiyo-e, it was the old wood-cut style that sort of chronicled everyday life in Edo, Japan. And our designer, our friend Eiko Nishida-san, a very good Japanese artist, and she just gets our beer, and all I have to do is explain the concept to her, And we're trying to tell a Japan story through our beers. Everybody looks, I'm not Japanese, of course, but I've been there over 20 years, and having that outsider's perspective, I think, gives me key insights about Japan that actually a Japanese wouldn't have. So the artwork, we try to have a reflection of both Japan and the sort of experience you're likely to be in for when you enjoy one of our beers. All the beers have a story, and the labels as well, but my inspiration for a pale ale was sort of a West Coast citrusy hoppy beer, but we wanted to, to make it a Japan beer, not an American West Coast one. And Nippon actually means the land of the rising sun, and so the land of the rising sun is what Westerners associate with Japan. We felt that with the sun rising over Mount Fuji, and we're located at the base of Mount Fuji, would be a very fun and intelligent way to convey that while our inspirations for this beer are American, the implementation and the result is very Japanese. There's never been sort of an indigenous beer culture in Japan. Beer was sort of brought to Japan in the Meiji Restoration, which is the late 19th century. The first brewery ever opened was in Yokohama, opened by an American, incidentally, and that brewery ultimately became Kirin. And it was a lager brewery, and from that, breweries, there were only a small handful of them. They were immediately sort of became large industrial entities brewing Germanic lagers. And so there's never been a history of sort of small-scale artisanal brewing in Japan until deregulation in the mid-90s allowed the emergence of small-scale brewing. And so it's really a nascent thing. Up to that point, everybody felt beer was an industrial lager. The mission's been to introduce them to the other 99% of the beer world that most people don't realize it has existed. But to the extent that there's a Japan aesthetic, the way they approach things, be it beer, sake, or food, anything for that matter, it's about sort of simplicity and a nuanced balance in the simplicity. So as complex as something is, it needs to be very basic and simple and balanced. I think the best Japanese craft beers tend to be very, very balanced at the end of the day. After you have one, you want to eat, whether you do or not, you like to have another. I make beer, my whole team does now, that we want to drink. And frankly, we really think very little about the consumer. It's interesting, I often get asked by Americans and fellow Westerners, what's the Japan taste, what do you have to, and I don't, outside of being sort of inspired by this general aesthetic of nuanced balance, I'd make the same beers no matter where I was, whether in the United States or in Europe or on Mars. I feel the key to success in craft brewing, no matter where you are, is make beers that you want to drink, and then lead the customer. Know what you're doing, be passionate about it, and approach it with utter conviction and honesty.